Hi, thanks for joining us for the Family Plots, Gardening in the Mid-South. I'm Chris Cooper. Our summer annuals have been beautiful, but it's time to change the flower bed over to winter plants. Also, apples are delicious, but it can be hard to grow a good one. Today we're going to talk about apple diseases. That's just ahead on the Family Plots, Gardening in the Mid-South.
Production funding for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South is provided by the WKNO Production Fund, the WKNO Endowment Fund, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the Family Plot. I'm Chris Cooper. Joining me today is Joellen Diamond. Joellen is Director of Landscape at the University of Memphis, and Mr. D will be joining us later. All right, Joellen, it is hot.
I can't believe this is October. I mean, it's over 90 degrees today, and it's been dry for over a month. So that's why our poor colocaceas,
Yeah, look at these
they
babies.
just, oh my gosh, they're saying, hey, we think it's hot too. They're trying to conserve water by folding up and turning away
Yeah.
from the sun as best they can.
And do you blame them?
I don't
my
blame them at
goodness.
all. But we're going to pull all of this up.
Wow.
But you know what? Look at the Dusty Miller.
They look good. They look real
We're just
good.
going to continue to keep it. We're gonna,
Okay.
At this point, we're going to see how long we can. This is the third fall season that this will have been living.
And they have been doing great.
Yes.
So what did you think about the performance of everything else that was in the garden?
Oh, the only thing that the heat has really suffered from is the impatiens.
Okay.
They just said, hey, it's too hot, and the colocaceae don't like it either.
Yeah.
But everything else seems to be, even though the Joseph's coat its leaves are curling too, if you can see that,
Yeah.
because it's too hot. So we'll see. I know it's irrigated, so it's been trying to get water. We'll see how dry it is.
All right.
But it's time to pull them up.
This is always the hard part for me. It did so good. Now they got to come out, right?
Now they've got to come out.
Should be pretty easy though, because the ground I'm sure is dry.
Now we're going to go ahead and dig these up because we're going to try to save them
Good.
for next year.
Right.
We will show you how to overwinter the colocaceae a little bit later in the show.
Yeah.
It's a real good root system.
There we go. Get out of there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good. Oops.
Yeah. I mean, look at that.
Very nice roots.
Wow.
It was very happy
Wow, it's a
here.
fibrous
Nice
root
white
system.
root system.
How about that?
Real healthy.
Yeah.
Well, the Dusty Miller have grown a little bit big, and we're going to try to trim them just a little bit for the next season. We can do that with pruners or scissors, since these are very small stems on these. Either one will cut them. So I'll give you those.
Okay.
And I'll
keep
take
those.
these, and we'll just literally just trim them back, just a couple of leaves.
Just a couple.
Yeah, see about that much.
Okay.
When you're pruning, you're going to go to a point of growth. So you come down how far you want, and you pick which set of leaves you want to cut just above, and then you cut. And that makes them shorter. All right, Chris, this year, besides the Dusty Miller, we're going to be putting in some bluish purple pansies.
Okay.
We're going to be putting in some red dianthus.
I like those.
And we're going to add, now we started off with daffodils in here. Well, we're going to try some daffodils again.
Okay.
And these are called Tay-to-Tay, one of the first daffodils to bloom in the spring.
Okay.
So, and they're smaller. So we're going to plant them up because we planted them the very back last time. We're going to plant them a little further in the bed, just on the outside of the Dusty Miller. And
Okay.
we're going to plant them in groups of 3. Here's 1, 2, 3.
And why do you like the group of 3?
Because it's odd number.
High number.
1 is not enough, 2 looks odd, 3 looks odd numbers look more pleasing to everybody.
Okay.
So we'll plant them in 3s.
And with the right side up too, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
When you look at the bulbs, you'll see there'll be a point on one end and some dried up roots on another. The dried up roots are the roots. So you plant that side down and the more pointed side up. They multiply
Good
very
deal.
well,
You there?
and a lot of people will pass them along. All right, now it's time to plant them.
Okay.
And really, as you can see, our trowels have measuring on it. So if we can get them to 4 inches deep, that's really all we need.
Okay, 4 inches deep. This helps.
I want to keep them in a tight cluster of 3 so they'll make some kind of impact. So it's easier to dig a bigger hole that's large enough to set all 3 of them in together
All right.
and then cover them up.
Yeah, there are a couple of earthworms in there.
That's good. What we're going to do now is put down fertilizer.
Okay.
And that will help the bulbs some and our new planting.
Okay. And what kind of fertilizer are we using?
This is a complete fertilizer, and more importantly, it's a slow release. And I'm going to go ahead and fertilize the Dusty Miller also.
Okay.
You don't need a whole lot. Really, the best thing to do now is to put some mulch, a small layer of mulch down
Okay.
on everything. We really only want to put about 1 inch or 2. Mostly I'm trying to go for 1 inch of mulch because there's already some mulch on it, and we don't want to put too much mulch down because pansies don't like the crowns of their plants buried. And we are mulching first before we plant, because if you've got this all planted with these very tiny, tender little plants, and you try to put mulch carefully around them, you'll end up burying them and breaking them, and it won't be good. So it's just a lot easier to mulch first and plant afterwards. So next we're going to put out our dianthus. Yeah, this is a new plant for us. Dianthus like cold weather.
Okay.
They don't necessarily bloom in cold weather, but they'll be gorgeous through the fall. But if it does get really cold, they'll stop blooming. They'll still stay green. Then in the spring, they'll bloom again. We only have 12 of the dianthus, and they're supposed to be an accent to the pansies. So we'll set those out first and evenly space the 12 plants that we have. Bring that one over here just a little bit. And we're ready to plant.
Okay.
To plant in mulch, you move the mulch out of the way. You dig your hole. Yes, and as much as this is irrigated, it's dry. Tickle these roots a little bit. And move the dirt and the mulch back over. And it's finished.
These have good root systems on them.
They do. And they got some nice blooms on them. They're waiting for cooler temperatures to bloom. Luckily, we have water because the ground is so dry, and we've put these nice moist roots into the soil. I want to try to surround their roots in the existing soil with some water, so we're going to try to water them a little bit. Okay,
All right.
now we are ready to plant the pansies.
Okay.
We're both going to fill them in, and we probably will not hit any of the daffodils because they're going to be lower in the ground than the rest of these. And it doesn't matter to plant over them because the daffodils will grow up through pansies and bloom.
It's good to know.
The pansies have a very low crown on them. So you want to make sure you don't bury this crown because that will smother the pansy. So again, move your mulch away. Dig a small hole. About this, you see, this is only like 1.5 inches deep, so we don't have to go very far. And then push the soil around it and be careful with not burying the crown. I tend to like to put pansies just a little bit high rather than low. Err on the side of being a little too high because of the crown issue. Okay, well, we kind of got a red, white, and blue theme going on this year. And in the spring, when the daffodils come out, they'll be yellow to add to the mix. So we got our primary colors and red, white, and blue. What more can you ask for?
Thank you, Joellen. I can't wait to see what this bed looks like later in the season. So let's get some water on these plants and let's get some water in us. Thank you much. There are a number of gardening events going on in the next couple of weeks. Here are just a few that might interest you. All right, Mr. D, let's talk about apple tree diseases. Where would you like to start with that?
I guess let's start with probably one of the most common problems that we have, and probably one of the earliest ones in the year, is fire blight. Fire blight is a bacterial disease. It is common during cool, wet conditions, which we have a lot of springs that are that way. And the diagnostic, and I'm using a great publication from the University of Georgia. This is a diagnostic, it's a pictorial diagnostic guide to common home orchard diseases. And so it is, I want to give full credit to the University of Georgia. And I just have the apple diseases here, and fire blight, the symptom of it that you see is, it's called a shepherd's crook. You'll have a dieback from the ends of the branches due to a bacterial canker that's on that branch. And it may be 10, 12 inches, even longer. The leaves will turn black. There'll be a crook that will develop, and they'll hang on the tree. It'll just stay on the tree. It won't fall off. This disease, very common on pears and apples. And the way you control it, if you have a history of problems, some varieties are more susceptible than others. But if you have a history of problems, then you need to spray during bloom with, actually twice, early bloom and late bloom, with an antibiotic. This is not something that's in your regular cover sprays for apples. And it's Agristrep is one, Streptomycin, Agristrep 17. There's several of them out there that are listed labeled for fire blight control. So that's the way you control that. But it's got to be taken care of before you see the problem.
Okay.
When you see the problem, there's no need to do anything. Just wait till next year and try to take care of it.
Okay. So what do we need to prune out then?
You do need to prune out the dead tissue. Later in the year, you need to dip your pruning shears in a solution of 1 part bleach to 9 parts water, and to keep from spreading that bacterial infection to healthy tissue. Okay. And but yes, you do need to prune that out and dispose of it. Don't put it in your compost bin. Right. You need to either burn it or get rid of it. Another very, very common problem that will show up later in the year is cedar apple rust. We have a lot of cedar trees around in our area. This disease spends part of its life cycle in a cedar tree. When it's in the cedar tree, the gall, it's kind of a purplish looking gall that will erupt into a beautiful University of Tennessee orange, UT orange structure that will release spores, and the spores will travel to an apple tree, and on the apple tree you have the bright UT orange spots on the leaf of the apple tree.
All right, so how do you treat it?
Well, there's a couple of ways. You can, if you cut down all the cedar trees within about a 10 or 15 mile radius, that will be one way to control it. You take out the host. But a more practical way to take care of it is to follow the home orchard spray guide for apple trees. And you spray with a solution that contains Captan and malathion every 10 to 14 days, 7 to 10 days, actually during the growing season. And that will prevent that from being a problem.
Okay. Wow.
Another problem, which is very common on apple trees, is sooty blotch and fly speck.
Yeah, know that one.
When I grew up, I thought that all apples were supposed to have little spots on them, and this is this disease. Or disease is kind of a several fungal organisms that cause this. It's pretty much just on the skin of the apple.
Okay.
And you can peel it off. If you scrub it off, you can actually scrub that off, but it will reduce the shelf life of an apple. The home orchard regular cover sprays will take care of that.
Okay.
And that's again the home orchard sprays that contain malathion and captan. And the next disease I want to talk about is bitter rot, and it is a concentric circles in a rotten spot on the fruit of an apple tree. It's caused by glomerella, and it has kind of concentric rings like a target, but sometimes instead of being circular, they're kind of V-shaped, and it actually sinks into the fruit and it goes on into the fruit. But again, the home orchard spray guide, following the regular cover sprays with a mixture of captan and malathion, 7 to 10 days during the growing season will take care of that.
Okay. Now, is that considered to be a fungus?
It is a fungal.
It is a fungus.
It is a fungal. Glomerella is the fungal organism. Another real common one is black rot.
Wow.
And this is kind of a brown, starts out as like a bruised area on the blossom end or the calyx end of the apple, and then it spreads and it also goes up into the fruit. It's Botryophyria. I can't say it today, Botryophyria. But it is a fungal organism, and it can be controlled by using regular cover sprays every 7 to 10 days with fungicide captan and the malathion as an insecticide. And I'm throwing the insecticide in there because if you're going to spray with a fungicide, you may as well control the insects while you're at it.
So with the black rot and the bitter rot, I mean, the fruit is still edible.
Yes, except it gets up in the fruit. You've got to cut it out.
Yeah, cut it out.
You've got to cut it out. Unlike the fly speck and or the earlier ones that were just on the skin. This will go into the fruit, and it will cause the entire. It can ruin the entire fruit, and with most of these, the fruit will hang on the tree like a mummy will hang on the tree. And sanitation is important. You need to pick those off and get rid of them. Again, don't put them in your compost bin. Put them in the Walmart bag, double bag them, get rid of them or something, and put them in the garbage. Apple scab is another very common disease, and it is present on the leaves. Sometimes it's called frog eye leaf spot.
Oh, okay.
But it has scabby lesions on the fruit, and it tends to be more on the skin. But it's a very common problem in apples, and it can be controlled again with a regular, cover spray every 7 to 10 days.
Wow.
And if you get a rain and it washes it off, it's gone. You need to go back out there and do it again. It can be really hard during rainy conditions.
Sure.
But again, the cover sprays contain captan and malathion. White rot is, again, Botryophyria. It's the same genus but a different species. It causes, and it has depressed, soft, enlarged lesions on the fruit. And it really will wipe out your fruit pretty quick. But it's more of a late season problem in apples and pears, and it becomes soft really quick. Most of the other rots, the black rot is kind of hard at first, and it takes it a while to get soft. But serious disease, sanitation again is important. Remove the mummified apples that are hanging on the tree, but prevent it from occurring with by using a home orchard spray guide and regular cover sprays with a material that contains captan or malathion.
Wow.
And that's the main.
Those are the main ones.
Apple diseases that we see, and we see all of these in here in the Mid-South.
Do we have that here?
We see them all in the Mid-South. We sure do.
Wow. Appreciate that good information, Mr. D. Very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, we're going to save these colocaceae for next year, They kind of propagate themselves, and you can root these, and sometimes they already have roots on them, and you can pot them up and save them. Best to do, what I would do is I would pot this whole thing up in a container and keep watering it until the first frost, and then I would bring it inside, either into probably the garage or someplace in a cool, dark place, and then you can cut off the dead foliage and let it dry out for the winter and keep it that way. Or you can cut off the foliage and get all of the dirt out of it. In fact, you probably want to rinse this, make sure all the dirt's off of them. And again, put this in a cool, dry place for the winter and plant it again this next spring.
All right, so here's our Q&A segment. You ready? These are
Ready.
good questions.
Let's do it.
All right, here's our first viewer email. Why is my bleeding heart plant turning yellow? And this is Laura, Memphis. And this is something that happened in July.
July, yes.
So what do you think about that? It
Well, you
turned
know,
yellow.
July was very wet. And turning yellow could be a lot of things. Sometimes it's not enough water, sometimes it's too much water. So if it was July, maybe it was getting too much water, being that bleeding hearts are usually in a shady area. So it might be getting too much water at that time, and why it's turning yellow. But in lack of nutrients, it could be lack of nutrients too. So you might want to check with a soil test, pH, and see what your pH is and if that's okay. But if this is, just remember, July was very wet, and being in the shady area, that might have just
Stayed
been
damp.
too wet
Yeah, stayed moist.
for it.
All right, Miss Laura, thank you for the question. Here's our next viewer email. My cucumbers did well early, but began to produce short, round, yellow fruits. What happened, Mr. D?
I think
What happened?
environmental also. If,
Uh-huh.
you know, going back into the summer, we had a wetter than normal summer. We had a wet June and July, and all of the vegetable plants that were out there, I think because it was so wet, developed a real shallow root system. And it stopped raining.
Yes.
You know, cucumbers need a lot of water. And one of the things that happens when cucumbers don't get enough water, they start developing little round, misshapen fruit and round fruit. And I think that's the problem. A lot of water early. They were doing fine early.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, my question would be, you know, have you been watering them since the dry weather hit? And I would doubt that that's the case. I'd say lack of water. Now, can you think of anything else?
Anything, Jola?
Well, it could be pollination problem. You know, sometimes they'll turn yellow and or just be small because they didn't get pollinated properly.
And
too.
wet weather can interfere with
Yeah,
that.
it will interfere with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So most of the time when you have misshapen fruit, it's usually lack of pollination.
No.
Yeah. And water.
And water.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So there you have it. All right. Thank you for that question. Here's our next viewer email. My husband put my bromeliad outside and it got sunburned. What can I do? And this is Geraldine. YouTube. Well, her husband, did the husband do something bad here?
Well.
Oh
yeah,
boy.
Kick him out.
He did something bad.
It's just, you know, if you
gosh.
can't just take a plant from one environment and throw it into another one, you're gonna get phytotoxicity, and that's what happened. It was
Shock,
it was just
Yeah.
shocked, and it burned it. And my
You
question.
see how she's talking to the guys here on the set? Yeah, you just can't do that. fellas.
Can't do
Okay.
that.
All right. Okay.
Well, you can't move a plant.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what plant it is.
Right,
You
right.
just can't move a plant from one environment to another that quickly, especially sunshine. If it's not had as much sunshine, like say it was in the house, you can't just move it outside into the sun. It's just too shocking for it. The plant cannot recover from that. But and I would like to have seen a picture because I'd like to know how much of the plant is burned.
Right.
Because obviously some of the plant might still be green, and it can live and come out of something like that. But it depends on how much of the leaves are burned, because you got to think of the plant has got to produce food for itself with chlorophyll, and if it doesn't have enough green to support itself, then that's what's going to cause it to its demise.
Right. Which can't be cut out.
Yeah, you can cut it out, but if you got to have some, you got to think green towards the stem and the roots. If it's green on the tips of it and it's dead in between, that's still not going to help. It's got to be green connected to the stem and the roots. And it might be able to come. It's going to take a while, though. It can take a while to come out of that.
What's wrong, Mr. D? You're shaking your head
He's
over
in
there.
the doghouse now.
Oh, he's in trouble. All right, Jared Dave, be easy on him. Okay, now he knows. He just heard from Miss Jordan, so he can get it right next time, all right? Hey, so Jordan, Mr. D, it's fun as always.
As
Yes, it
always.
is.
Thank you
Very
much.
good.
Remember, we love to hear from you. Send us an email or letter. The email address is familyplot@wkno.org, and the mailing address is Family Plot, 7151 Cherry Farms Road, Cordova, Tennessee 38016. Or you can go online to familyplotgarden.com. That's all we have time for today. For more information about the plants Joellen planted or the apple diseases Mr. D talked about, go to familyplotgarden.com. You can also see what we've planted in the flower bed through the years or get more information about apple tree care. Be sure to join us next week for the Family Plot, Gardening in the Mid-South. Be safe.